Hello and greetings, everyone. This is Caroline Staten with Transition US, and thank you so much for joining our online event today. Our principal aim with these online events is to provide practical support to the leaders of transition initiatives, those mulling over starting an initiative, and community leaders who are working on resilience building within their communities. The online event today is called Hyper-Locavoring, the joys, frustrations, and blessings of living very, very local. And Vicki has a lot to say about her experiment of eating within 10 miles of her home and all of the experience and all of the learning that she did in that quest, as well as really looking into the hands that bless and deal with our food. So to introduce you to Vicki Robin, if you don't know who she is, Vicki is a well-known author and has written a very, very widely circulated book called Your Money or Your Life, Transforming Your Relationship with Money and Achieving Financial Independence. She's written for the Wall Street Journal, Money, Women's Day, Newsweek, Utne Magazine, the New York Times, and many other newspapers have reported on her work on lowering consumption in North America. Vicki served on the President's Council on Sustainable Development's Task Force on Population and Consumption. She's co-founder of the New Roadmap Foundation, the Center for New American Dreams, Sustainable Seattle Conversation Cafes, the Simplicity Forum, the Turning Tide Coalition, Let's Talk America, and etc. She was a co-founder of Transition Whidbey as well and was a board member of Transition US and currently serves as an advisor for us. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Vicki. And Vicki, take it away and lead us through Hyper-Locavoring, what it is, what you did, and what we can do.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be with you, Caroline. I have a great love for Caroline, for Transition US, for the transition movement, and for all of us who are making really good faith concerted efforts to adjust our way of living to what we know about the current conditions on the planet and what we believe is coming down the pike. So I'd like to do some polls first, and I will just give you options, and then you press the number on your keypad that I tell you if that option is real for you. Okay, so we're going to start with press 1 on your keypad if you eat. Oops, nobody's eating. Yes, there we go. We have some eaters. We have some non-eaters, too. You're going to have to tell us what you do for non-eating. Yeah, we have a bunch of people who don't eat. So maybe you can't see your keypad. But anyway, I would like to believe that everybody on this phone call is an eater. And I won't call your names as to who these breatharians are. Okay, so I'm going to put those down. It looks like, yeah. And then, so press 1 on your keypad if you make a concerted effort to buy locally. And the USDA says that local, defines local as 400 miles, which I know is not a hyper-locavore number, but basically you make a really good faith effort to buy veggies, fruit, honey, meat, grain within 400 miles of your home. Press 1 on your keypad if that's true for you. Oh, great. We have a couple of people. Yeah. Okay. Great. You're not right if you do that and wrong if not. But I see that there's quite a few of us. All of the eaters, none of the eaters seem to be making any effort to get hyper-local food. But, you know, if you don't eat, that's okay. I'm sorry, I'm being silly. Okay,
so Vicki, that's looks like it's about 41% are making a concerted effort. And you know, people on the call.
Number of people who obviously don't have a keypad, I would say probably 75% when you come right down to it, of the people who are eaters make an effort. Okay, so put those hands down, and then press 1 on your keypad if you grow some of your own food in the summer for home consumption. Yeah, okay, great. We have not quite as many, but, you know, quite a few.
About
right
35% so far.
And then if we calculate in the non-hand raisers, probably it's about 50% of you do grow some of your own food. Now, how many, okay, so put those hands down. How many people do that plus put up food for the off-season? You know, like you freeze or can or dry, or, you know, that what you grow in the garden in September, you're making an effort to put it up. Okay, so that's way fewer of us. And that's pretty much how it is in this world. You know, the idea of growing in the summer and putting up food for the winter is not as common as it used to be. Okay, put those hands down. And the final question is, press 1. Put those hands down. Yeah. Press 1 if you grow surplus food and you sell it to other people. Like if you sell it at the farmer's market, you have a farm stand. You know, if you not only grow for your own family, but you actually sell food. Okay. So we don't have any. 1, 2. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So that's three people so far.
Okay. Well, that's great. Okay, I was just trying to get a sense of who's here, and just with questions that really are questions that arose for me as I tried to do my Hyper-Locavoring experiment. So a little history about me. So basically, I've always been an eater. I was just born that way. And I've just been bending my elbow for, 67 years, shoveling food into my mouth. And I did some research, and by the time I die, I will have processed my body will have processed about 6 tons of food, and probably yours as well. So basically, that's my main qualification for having examined what it takes to be a local eater. I am a gardener, but not a great gardener. I'm a cook, but not a great cook. I know how to can and freeze and dry and things like that, but I'm sort of lacking that. I'm not a paragon of virtue, but I am a paragon of somebody who runs what I call sustainability as extreme sport experiments. If I believe something is true and necessary, I will make a good faith effort to live that. I'll do something. Like when I really understood how out of integrity it was for me to fly all over the world to talk about sustainability, I took a year off from airplane flying, which, it wasn't that hard. I would get up in the morning and I wouldn't fly. But I took a month off when I realized that a lot of my talking was sport talking. I took a month off from talking and just had a little chalkboard. So I've done things like that. I've lived in the desert by myself for a period of time to just examine my addiction to being around other people. So it was not odd that having become aware, having started Transition Whidbey because I was aware of peak oil, climate change. I was aware that relocalization of our communities was important now so that we could get ahead of the curve, but would be extremely important in the years to come, and I wanted to support my community in making those shifts. One of the things that we decided to do was we hosted potlucks, monthly potlucks that actually are still going on. And every month we had a speaker, and the first speaker I got was a woman named Pam Mitchell, who's a market gardener, sells at our farmers market. And she had told me a while earlier, I'd asked her, hey, can the people on Whidbey Island live from the food grown on Whidbey Island? Like, how are we doing? I live in a semi-rural community, island, 45 miles long, lots of open space, farmland, forests. You look at it superficially, and you think this place should be loaded with food. And Pam calculated the number of people, number of calories a day, what we can grow on Whidbey Island, productivity of the fields. And she said we could survive for a few weeks in August at best. So that had been plaguing me, the idea that even though everything looked fine on the surface, I was starting to see that the supermarket is sort of like a Wizard of Oz screen. It's like a vending machine, and we go there and we have money in our pocket, and the machine gives us food, and we go home and eat, and we think that everything's hunky-dory, but you disrupt the supply chain, and living on an island, that's even more crucial than people who live on the mainland. And you're faced with what's behind the Wizard of Oz screen, which is a food system that is very, very, very dependent on global supplies. So I was primed with that disturbance, and 2 years ago, a friend of mine who was actually at that point a partner with Pam, Tricia, just came up to me at a 4th of July party and said that she and her husband had watched this takeoff on Super Size Me on Netflix or YouTube or something, and he said, oh, we should do a Super Veggie Me, see if you could live. He suggested that she try to live for a month from what was grown in her garden. She said, no way, I can't do that. But she started asking around, who might want to run this experiment? And I said, sure, this is the perfect opportunity for me to take a look at what would it take for me as an individual and beyond that for people everywhere to make a commitment to eating hyper-locally. So we decided to do it in September of 2010, and I said, look, I'll blog every day to tell the story. So she provided me with food, and I blogged. And pretty soon in August when we were preparing, I realized, ooh, there's no eggs, milk, meat. There's no protein in this from her garden. There's no field beans. The field beans might be protein. There was no almonds. Clearly, there's no almonds where I live. And so we agreed that since she lived within 10 miles of my home, that we would just draw a circle around my home, and I could provide for myself the other foods that I needed from within that circle. So then began the hunt. And somebody, when I was starting the hunt, said to me, well, that's no problem. You can just go down to our local market, which is a locally owned market. I said, that's ridiculous. You don't understand. And I went down to the market, and there was only one thing there that was made within 10 miles of my home, and that was honey. So fortunately, I had sweetener. And I also realized that I wasn't going to live for months without caffeine. That would make it suffering. So I invented this idea of exotics, that I could have 4 exotics. I could have caffeine, olive oil, salt, and a few other spices, and lemon, because I drink hot lemon water every morning. It's sort of a health thing that I do. So anyway, 4 exotics, and I found local meat. And suddenly the landscape went from being sort of a backdrop to my busy life to being crucial. Oh, there's somebody who has a beef sale. I'm going and I'm going to get that beef, and who has eggs and where can I get them? And so Tricia every day, just every 5 days, I guess, she would bring a box of food over, and then I would calculate what I was eating and how it was going, and I became fascinated, absolutely fascinated. Every day that I blogged, I became more interested, and I could see how food is an entry point to everything that's crucial to our lives. It's it links to love and comfort and belonging. It links to health, both vibrant health and then also health issues, whether it's obesity or heart disease, that food is so crucial to understand our relationship with food. And then it was right about that time that the wheat crop had failed in the former Soviet Union. And suddenly there were food riots in Mozambique because the wheat from Mozambique was coming from the Soviet Union, or former Soviet Union. Excuse me, that dates me. We could just call it Russia. So I could see, oh my God, this links up the world. The world is linked through food, and we're extraordinarily vulnerable. So the more I blogged, the more interested I became, and I found some deeper things going on. Part of it was, pissing and moaning about what I didn't have, but part of it was realizing that there's a lot more to this than just what I put in my mouth. And so I started to, it was almost like a spiritual revelation as well as an eating revelation. Of course, there were hard things. One was that there was no wheat, and I'm pretty attached to my piece of toast in the morning, and I'm pretty attached to nuts, and I'm pretty attached to things that go crunch in the mouth. And I did some research on that, and I found out that there are people that are called crunchaholics. You know, they're people who are dealing with stress. You know, they were all jaw people. So so I went on the hunt for things that were crunchy and crispy, and I've just I told stories about that. And I knew in somebody's yard he'd grown 5 rows of wheat just as a test crop, and the rains had come and it had gotten a little moldy. He said I wasn't going to use them. So, man, I was out there and I clipped off those wheat heads, and then I thought, what do I do now? So I threshed them in a jar with an egg beater, and then I winnowed them with my hairdryer, and then I ground them with my coffee grinder, and then I didn't have any baking soda because, you know, that's not in my 10 miles, so I just put some oil with them and made them to pancakes, you know. And so it was like just things like that were revealing to me my food habits, my preferences, my demands, the sort of the things about eating that I hide from myself and other people. It just put me into, it's not just like local food is like a good idea, you know, we all should do it, but it really took me through the process of what is my relationship with food? What must I have in order to be happy at the level of food? So I'd like to give you all time to reflect on that in small groups, and basically just to share a little bit about your personal relationship with food. And I'd like to get you into groups of 3, and you just say hello, say your name, so that we know. We just lost a couple of people. They don't want to be in groups. So just say your name, and then talk about a food memory, something from your childhood, something that you have associate with the good life out of your childhood associated with food. That's your first go-round. So just each person take a minute and talk about a food memory. And then on the second go-round, talk a little bit about your food shadow, the things that you do that in the background. You have food values, you have the things that you really know you ought to do, and then there's those little food habits or those little food, what are your exotics? What are the things you must have? Hi, everybody. I hope you're all back. Would you press 1 in your keypad if you can hear me so that I know we're all back together? Yay. Okay, great. I'd love to have anything you heard or said or realized. What was that like for you to have that conversation? What came up for you? What was moving? What was confusing or disturbing? Press 1 in your keypad if you want to share something. And remember that by sharing, you are actually probably sharing for everybody, because everybody has these feelings and concerns. Anybody willing to say a little bit about what that was like? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. Okay, one more opportunity. Yes, yay, Terry. Okay. Terry, what do you say about it?
Well, there's only one other person in our, there's 2 of us in our group, and it turned out we lived about 10, 15 miles apart, and it was commented that it was a small world, but other than that, I think just the things that we're talking about, the kinds of questions and the things we remembered and all that is all, pretty familiar. I think that there wasn't anything really strange or that we didn't know, it wasn't familiar to us.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. Yeah. Okay, and we have Sylvia. You want to say something?
Actually, I was wanted a clarification question about the shadow part. So is that, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that kind of the part that we don't want to show to anybody? So maybe foods that we hide or sneak or something like that?
Precisely. I was once asked, like, this is just my joke, that when asked what my favorite position is, I would say 2 o'clock in the morning, spoon in hand, refrigerator door open. And it's just my discovery, it's just based on my discovery that one of the barriers to me for local eating was to be faced with all the things that my habits and demands, inner demands for food that I wouldn't have been aware of had I not done that experiment. So that's what that was based on.
Gotcha. Thank you. It was fun. It was just fun to share the memories. I was telling Stana was my partner, and that it's fun to share the memories too, because my father's just recently passed, so there's a lot of food memories connected with my father. So that was fun to just be reminded of. And then it was fun to also think about the exotics, because I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't have that drug of choice that a lot of people do. So I'm thinking if I was stranded somewhere or really could only eat locally, I think the hardest thing for me was that I like to nibble a lot, and I don't know if I'd have the nuts and the fruits and all that kind of stuff that I would really want to do, but really be around healthful food, because that's kind of a big priority for me. So that I'm not sure.
That whole nibble thing, I've got the nibble thing too. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna press on and talk about some the next layer of what I want to share with you about sort of the motivations for why make a shift to local food. And I'm presuming, since this is a Transition U.S. conversation, that many of you have thought about that. So I would just like to open up a conversation. Press 1 in your keypad if you have something to share. We'll do it popcorn style about. So there's 2 questions, and I'll try to be clear about it. If you have shifted in any way, shape, or form to eating local, what motivated you to do that? And then the second part of it is, and/or, what have you said to others that's actually motivated them, not lecturing them about how wrong they are and what they should do to change, but what's actually motivated them? So does anybody want to share what motivated you to make a shift to local food, or what you've said to others has been an effective way to inspire them? So press 1 in your keypad if you want to share about either one of those. Yeah, Harry.
We decided to do it for the transition motives, is the same reasons I think that you were thinking of as well, or one of the reasons, that supply lines may never be the way that they are now with the climate change and peak oil being such as they are, and it's just behooves one to be more resilient and self-reliant in your community and closer to home, to have some kind of food security. But also for the spiritual reason that you were talking about, of participating in the immediate environment around you. It gives meaning to your life. It puts you in a place as a participant in the world rather than just a consumer of things unknown from various other places.
Got it. Thank you so much for that, Terry. Anybody else want to talk about what's motivated you to make a greater shift to local food, or what you've talked about to others that's motivated them? Yeah, Mary?
Yes, I guess I woke up. I don't know how or why I woke up. I'm just really grateful I did. I grew up on a farm, so we didn't call it eating local. We just called it eating what we had there, and we ate very, very well. And then I grew up, moved into town, and kind of contracted what I call grocery store-itis, and very pervasive grocery store-itis. And then I guess it was kind of in the 2000s, maybe 2005 or 6, something like that. For some reason or other, I woke up to the fact that I had contracted grocery store-itis, and I started writing. I journal, and I just generally write about my awarenesses. And so I wrote an article for a publication, and I called it Waking Up to Eating Healthy and Eating Local, and talked about Rip Van Winkle slept for 20 years, and I think we've been asleep at the wheel for the last 50 or 60 years about our food. So I woke up, and I wrote about the fact that we are, the old saying, you are what you eat. Well, I added a word to that. You are what you ate. Whether I'm eating beans or beef, I am what the beans or beef ate.
Mm.
So do I know what the beans or beef ate? And I do, because I buy them from, I either grow it myself or I buy it from the people who raise it or grow it. And in 2009, I became involved in Transition Town movement, which led to a small group of us starting a farmer's market, which I now co-manage. So yes, I do know what my food ate, and that's vitally important to me now. And it just makes sense. And I can't imagine not being able to eat that way. To have to eat from the grocery store would be all torturous punishment for me. And I buy very, very little from the grocery store. So I feel very grateful about that. And I'm on a very low income, by the way. So people who think that they cannot eat well and eat local because they can't afford it, I'm on a very low income, and I eat very well, and about 90% local, year-round.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for that, and I think that's a really great concept. It's sort of like our eyes are glazed on the sort of the cans and the boxes that are in the front of the grocery store shelf, not realizing that every time somebody takes something off the shelf, somebody comes along and pushes it up. We're in this sort of like unreal display and don't think about where that food comes from, and even further, what that food ate. I think that's incredible, because you when you ask that, you're really asking, how are my soils doing? That's what you're really asking. What did those beans eat? Well, the beans ate whatever nutrients there were in the soil, and the nutrients come from the activity, the livingness of the soil, and the freshness of the air. So that's exactly what I was finding, is that through paying attention to local eating, I dropped into this awareness of the health of the system that was feeding me. I really appreciate that. And is there anybody else who wants to say anything, or I'll go on? Press 1. No. Okay, so I'm just going to continue on with the ways I've discovered to talk about this. In terms of motivation, I really thought about the motivations that are normally expressed for eating local food, that it's fresh, and that it's wholesome, and that it's more nutritious, and there is pretty good evidence that those claims may or may not be true. I mean, there are, if you just take fossil fuel off of the table as an issue, that in terms of freshness, it may be that the things in your grocery store that came from New Zealand and they were shipped overnight and are there in your store are fresher than the grapes that you bought from a neighbor and have sat in the fridge for 3 days. So it's not about necessarily nutrition or freshness or anything, but I found that these are the reasons that I found most compelling for myself. And one is that I realized, it's what Terry was saying, it's the spiritual value. I had this shift in perspective from being a consumer in an industrial system, eating anywhere food, having no real relationship with my food other than that brief journey from the shelf to the shopping cart to my house to the frying pan to my mouth, and that could be a fairly rapid journey, and that's all the relationship I had. And I didn't even think that it was important to have anything more. But as I did the 10-mile diet, I realized that I had never actually lived anywhere. I was sort of floating. I was sort of a floating mind living above the planet because I never made any conscious effort to commit myself to my place on Earth. I never made myself vulnerable to a specific place. I treated home as something that was, to use the economic term, fungible. Like, well, if I'm not living here, I could live someplace else. I treated home, the actual experience of home and community, like a grocery store item or consumer item. If I didn't like this one, I could have that one. It's my starter home, it's my starter marriage, it's my starter community. It's our interpretation of freedom in this country is so deeply embedded that we actually, unless you really are in some way woven in so tightly to a place that you really can't move, we don't make a commitment to our place, because we can go anywhere and eat anything. We can do that. The system, this sort of illusory Wizard of Oz system, gives us the impression that we really don't need to ground. And when I made a commitment to this place, and I could not, I live on Whidbey Island, and the furthest north I could get is just north of Freeland. So I had no access to Green Bank, and certainly not to Coopville. I really was constrained. And what opened up for me was this sense of aliveness in my place. I started to realize that food isn't just in the market, and food isn't even just in the garden, that food is wild all around me. It's the mushrooms in the forest, it's the nettles in the spring, it's the burdock root that's growing like a weed across the fence, and that probably many, many more things in my surround are food, but I have like these blinders on that says only this certain range of things that grow are edible, because I've been trained through the supermarket to think of it that way. And having that experience was sort of like, it was like a falling away of some sort of delusion from my mind. It was like I had eyes that opened up in the back of my head. I could feel the life of the place all around me, not just sort of picking and choosing out there. And at one and the same time, I felt very vulnerable. Like, if my place on Earth does not flourish, I don't flourish. And, it's sort of the shutting down of options. Like, well, I could go someplace else. I could get it from someplace else. For example, like we think of Napa Valley olive oil. I thought, well, if I had, regional food, I would get Napa Valley olive oil. And then I learned that, no, Napa Valley olive oil is olives. It doesn't matter where the olives come from. It's just where they're plentiful. It could be Tunisia. It could be Argentina. And from a consumer perspective, we really have a demand to never, never, ever, 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 ever have the experience that we are out of something. So it felt very vulnerable, and at the same time, it felt very reassuring that I am surrounded. I'm not totally dependent on the grocery store. I can come to know my place in such a way that I am confident to eat from here. And also there was the quality of, not only was I depending on Tricia, and Tricia and I became really good friends, but I was also depending on a larger range of farmers, and every farmer I was dependent on became a friend. It was somebody I knew. It stopped being that the farmer's market was just sort of an alternative to the grocery store, It started to be that I really realized that the people who were standing at those stands had actually grown those carrots, and that it wasn't a question of going around stall to stall comparison shopping and seeing who had the best deal this week. These are real people, and if these real people flourish, I flourish. And so I started to understand that the farmers in my community have issues that I have no idea about. it was just sort of their job to prosper. It wasn't my job that they prosper. So I started to become interested in my farmers and what's going on with them, which led me into very interesting inquiry about what it would take for us to truly relocalize our food systems. So that was one thing. It was the restoration of home. And the other part of it was a restoration of hope. That I've been an activist, a sustainability activist for many decades. And I worked really, really hard. And, you know, even though my book, Your Money, Your Life, impacted many individuals, it actually never seemed to turn the tide of the voracious appetite of the industrial growth economy to chew up and chew through the natural systems, the natural and social systems of our planet. And I lost hope. I'd had hope because if I work on this and I have to work shoulder to shoulder with other people who are working on it, we're gonna succeed, you know. And then I realized, no, we're not succeeding. And so I can work harder and harder and harder, but I'm not necessarily, none of that effort is actually going to make a dent in what I care about. And it led me into a long process of surrender, of the realization that my personal will is not the steering wheel for the course of history. And it started to open up this feeling of that there are other sources of hope that are not human created. And through the 10-mile diet, I realized that several things, one of which is that hope is not a human creation, that hope actually is the nature of life itself. Life is shot through with hope. And how do I know this? I know this because I've never seen one living thing that does not sort of get up in the morning with an expectancy that it will be received by its environment. You know, the seed grows. It doesn't sort of contemplate whether the nutrients are correct before it grows. Now, everything is engaged in self-expression no matter what the conditions are. You know, I worked in a hospice, and I watched people's hearts pump out life after the people were quite, in other ways, you know, quite gone. And so for me, the vitality of life itself is I can draw on that as a living being, and I can hope alongside of life. I don't have to generate it. I don't have to have any evidence for it. The evidence for hope is that I'm alive. Hope is the space into which I can create, and anybody can create. And the second thing I realized was that I actually, even though I know all the data, I really don't know what's going to happen 10 minutes from now. So how do I really, really, really know that these dark pictures of collapse that I have carried with me and that have motivated me are the total story? The other thing about life is that what I can see of it and what any of us can see of it is very, very, very small slice of what's actually there. So that was another source of hope for me, that, you know, just the strange possibility that I may not know everything, you know. And then I realized, the third thing I realized is that as I get older, I'm 67 now, and I connect with younger people who are full of vim and verve and vigor and big ideas and wanting to, get out there and make a difference in the world, that it is my responsibility as an elder to hold out the possibility that against, all my life experience, all my disappointments, to still hold that youthful optimism, youthful desire to remake the world in a brand new way, that has every possibility of succeeding. It's my responsibility to hold that thought. So this experiment actually took me out of a sort of a weariness with the world and put me into this feeling like I'm part of life unfolding here. And there's a wonderful term that I found that's called serotiny, S-E-R-O-T-I-N-Y, serotiny. And it is it's that aspect of nature that holds back expression until the conditions are right. And I know that I said all life, expresses itself, but it's this thing of the lodgepole pine. Those cones only open when there's been fire. And so you go like, oh, brilliant. Nature's figured out a way to reseed the landscape after a fire. And the first plants that come forth at that time are the fireweed. So you've seen these devastated landscapes that are clear-cut or burned, and you see all these saplings there, and you see the fireweed coming in, and you start to see this succession of life once again taking over that landscape. And I thought, this is it. This is what's happening to us at this time. That embedded in all of us is the capacities that only express under stress. And so we're being stressed in this time, but that's something that nature has up her sleeve as well. It's not contrary to what nature does. Nature installs in everything the capacity to respond to different conditions in different ways so that flourishing can continue. So this is this feeling of the rediscovery of hope as well as the rediscovery of home. And then beyond that, the other thing I want to say is that I started to, in asking my farmers what they needed in order to flourish, and what would it take for us to revitalize our regional food systems, to bring the sources of nourishment closer to home. Not just me as an individual to commit to eating locally, but me as an individual commit to the flourishing of my farmers and the food system in my region. And a couple of big ideas came up for me when I was thinking about that. One is that I call it complementary food systems. And here's the idea there, which is that people put in opposition local food versus industrial food. And we make the industrial food wrong and local food, organic food, right. And push against Monsanto and the concentration of power. So we're sort of like David and Goliath. But during my 10-mile diet, I realized I had a day when I just did a list of everything I liked about the industrial food system, that it's easy and it's cheap and it's convenient and it tastes good and, and I don't have to worry about it, and I can have oranges in the summer and I can have grapes in the winter, and, it's just like on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And I have to say, honestly, this is a little what I was talking about the shadow. Honestly, I really like the system. I have to say that I have become accustomed to this wonderful cornucopia, or at least apparent cornucopia of the industrial system. And even though I was willing to do extreme 10-mile diet, ultimately, I didn't think that I didn't think that it was going to be reasonable for everybody to do it. I wasn't like a proponent of everybody eating hyper-locally. I realized on Whidbey Island, that would be ridiculous at this point. We need a process. And we need to increase capacity of our regional food systems to feed us. We need to do it incrementally. This year, maybe we can produce 5% of our food. Next year, maybe 6, maybe 8. Maybe in 10 years, we can do 25% of our food. There's going to be a lot of shifts that are going to go on. And so I likened it to the process of alternative medical treatments coming into the mainstream. That some treatments were considered quackery 50 years ago. And then there was, maybe 20 years ago, there was the idea of alternative medicine. It was like acupuncture and herbs and things like that. These are all alternatives. And then there was a level of science and sobriety about those treatments, that they were having a degree of success and it was replicatable, that the allopathic medical community began to accept those treatments as part of it. And so now it's called complementary medicine, that basically medical practitioners legally can pull from a wide range of baskets of treatment, some of which were considered quackery 50 years ago. And so the same is true for food, is that we're going to build these complementary food systems that in conditions of insecurity can feed the people to a certain degree. And so that it's basically a question of national security. It's a question of security. It's like when you start to study the industrial food system, you start to realize that the appearance is that it is a never-ending cornucopia. But the reality is that some of those supply chains are pretty weak, and as we all know who are involved in transition, the weak link is very much fossil fuels, the availability of fossil fuels into the far future. So a case can be made for building up complementary food systems on food security by itself. You know, you don't even have to say it's fresher and all those good things. You can just simply say that we as eaters in regions, really for our own security and our own ability to provide for our families healthy, safe, affordable food, we definitely need to be able to do whatever we can to fill out the agricultural capacity. And there was a study that was very heartening for me in King County, where Seattle, basically the county that Seattle is in. And they did a study of the 27 fruits and vegetables that are easily grown in our region. And the agricultural land that is available, not even the stuff that's underneath, Boeing, but the agricultural land that's available, it's available, there's private property, et cetera. I mean, it's not available right now to grow on, but it's available, it's there. And they discovered that King County could be 100% food secure in those 27 fruits and vegetables. In other words, there was sufficient capacity to feed everybody, to feed everybody. Their annual supply of those 27 fruits and vegetables. And there was actually even capacity to provide 100% food security in terms of chickens, eggs and meat. In other words, what it told me was we haven't completely lost we haven't completely lost our control over our food. It's out there. It's there to be had. So I came up with a couple of ideas that I'd love to get some discussion on now that I've gone through all these thoughts. I'd like to get your impressions of these two ideas about policies that could help us build up our local systems again. One is that I talked to my farmers and I found out that the regulations are such that small-scale producers are unable to make money from what they produce. Part of it is, having a couple of goats and being able to milk them and sell the milk or cheese. That's illegal in most places. But it's the baking of the bread in your home. It's people don't have the money for a commercial kitchen. They don't have the money for the licensing to sell their eggs. And so there's a whole food culture that's underground that could come above ground, and we could have neighbor-to-neighbor trade for money, And people, it would start to encourage, if it wasn't illegal to do some of these practices, we could have neighbor-to-neighbor trade. And it would come under, for me, I think that the model is the Good Samaritan laws. In other words, it would be you'd sign a release with your farmer. And you say, I take responsibility for my choice to eat your food. I believe in you. I believe that your practices are good, and I'm going to eat your food. So if we could take the neighbor-to-neighbor trade out of the hyper-litigious society that we live in, it could inspire many, many, many people to increase their food production locally, in their yards and backyards and, small-scale farms. So that's one, scale-appropriate regulations. And the other one is the issue that I'm sure many people are aware of, that the average age of farmers in the United States is 57 to 60 years old. Only about 2% of the people in this country farm anymore. And that is an incredibly dangerous situation. We're losing local knowledge on agricultural practices and makes us incredibly dependent on industrial farming. And at the same time, there are lots of young people who want to farm. There's people who want to change professions, and they were teachers or they were executives, and they want to farm. There's returning vets who want to farm. There's prisoners who've been released from prison who want to farm. There's a lot of people who have a passion for growing food now, but they're being kept out of it because of the cost of education, the cost of seed, the cost of equipment, the cost of land. And so we could do something like a GI Bill, after the Second World War, something where loan guarantees, all these various ways, that it would be a national effort, a national young and new farmers getting established. So those are, I talked a long time, but I wanted to paint the whole picture from the little experiment I did, what I liked, what I didn't, the impact it had on me spiritually and in terms of community and in terms of my own will to be engaged in life for the rest of my life, my own verve in existence, and then diving into what would it take for this experience of mine to be generalized, not by everybody doing a 10-mile diet, but by strengthening the capacity.
So again, in the meantime, with people, if you have any resources that you'd like to share with each other, and press 1 on your keypad if you've read a good article or found a good website. And Mary, go ahead.
Here in Cincinnati, we started a slow money group about 6 months ago. So I don't know if people are acquainted with slow money or not, but there's a book written by Woody Tash, and there's other literature on slow money. Basically, we call our group Local Loans for Local Foods. So it's just a network of individuals who are making loans to small local food enterprises. And I think that could be complementary to what Vicki was saying as far as like a quote-unquote GI Bill. So in addition to federal funds or state or local funds, there also could be we individuals who find it important to support our local farmers and loan they're just small loans. They're not huge investments like that.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I think we have Vicki back.
Can you hear me now?
Yay! We can.
Yay! Okay. I'm sorry, my phone system didn't work. And I heard what you were saying, Mary, and we have started, I don't know if you mentioned the Local Investing Opportunity Network, but it's a innovation that comes out of Port Townsend in my region, where they developed a lenders network, a lenders and borrowers network that I call speed dating for lending. It's where people who have an interest in investing in the local community form a network of friends, and then they open up for social events to people who have projects, businesses, local businesses they want to have loans for. And the people who want loans will put in a proposal that's distributed to the members of the network. And if somebody wants to make that loan, they'll make it. And I have loaned money in my community to one of the old-time farmers to build a greenhouse so that she could produce winter greens, and so that's up and running. And I've also invested in a local solar project. So this is, as Mary was saying, this is the small-scale ability that we have to put our money locally, and without, with sufficient guarantees. I mean, there's a certain quality of lending into your local community. The guarantee is that the people are part of the community, and the community is going to support you and support all the parties in the proper repayment. So we have that network going. We've tried to do a credit union, but we're really probably too small to really get it going. But we have a regional credit union. So I agree that finance for farming is, one of the important keys to getting this whole machinery of relocalization going. Is there anybody else who has something that they'd like to share about this or responses? I'm just beginning to try to express my thoughts on this question. And, if something didn't make sense to you, if you want to challenge it, I'd appreciate it.
And Michael's got a comment or a question.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Two thoughts that I'm kind of excited about. One is permaculture, basically the challenge of how much food can you grow even on your own property with intercropping and that. So that's actually something I'm researching. And I'm even more excited about aquaponics. I just set up a system where I'm growing tilapia for food in my basement, 240 gallons, which isn't much. But then I'm pumping the water into a gravel bed under glass just outside on the south facing. And I just started planting seeds. And it's winter and I'm in Chicago, so hopefully this is going to work, but it really should throughout the winter so that we'll be able to harvest fresh lettuce throughout the year. And I'm actually working with another engineer on the thought of developing large-scale systems for this. It's been done. This isn't like a brand new technology, but Vicki, like you were saying, just people building greenhouses and growing, whether it's aquaponically or in dirt, just seems like the right thing to do. So I don't know where I'm going with all this, but I'm just really excited about being involved with it and hopefully coming up with some of the solutions.
That's fantastic. Is there anybody else who's doing permaculture or aquaponics or doing experiments in their own lives, that their own yards and farms that are exciting to them? Thank you for that. What do people notice in their communities? Is there do you have any response about what's the interest in your local communities in local food? How widespread is that? How are your farmers doing? Any observations about how local food is faring where you are? I know that having done, Caroline, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just had, I live in Northern California in Sebastopol, and last Sunday went to the farmers market that is happening for the first time this late in the year. And there was so much abundance of produce and so many people. Everything was clustered together, and vendors were sharing their booth space with other vendors, and we were all on top of each other in a really unique kind of cozy way. And Peruvian band was playing panpipes and just music. I mean, it was really exceptional. And the change in the farmers market and the local support that farmers are getting has really increased, and I've just really noticed that, and really noticed it this past Sunday. So there's a lot more people growing food and a lot more intention to be buying that food, and it's just got a robustness to it that it didn't have in the same kind of way. So that's what I'm noticing.
And so do you have any guesses about what is generating that robustness? Why is it growing in your community? Why is it flourishing?
I think it's part of a national trend, for one thing, and part of, slow food, which started a number of years ago and brought more awareness to that. It's part of the transition work that's been done in the community, and it's also a resurgence of the Grange, the Sebastopol Grange, and more people being a part of that and kind of putting their, stick in the ground, saying, we're gonna do better with our food purchases. So I think it's a combination of a number of things like that.
Have you in your region, because I know that you there in Sebastopol and in the North Bay area is sort of a hotbed of permaculture and projects for growing food. Have you made some progress in terms of changing policy? Have you gotten up to the government level in any way, shape, or form, or is this all sort of improvisational individual choice?
I know was some policy changes in the East Bay in terms of people could now sell their food that they grow, and that wasn't legal in that area. So that's a change sort of in the general greater San Francisco area, and it trickled over into some of the other cities, particularly in the East Bay. And I think the policy change most notable in this county is gray water systems. And there's the first permitted gray water system was, not that many years ago. And now there's a challenge to see how many gray water systems can be installed, and city governments are involved in that. So not only was there policy change on that level, but the governments are really behind it, and even attending classes themselves and getting their own home gray water systems installed. And there's also been a very active community garden network that's been set up, and that's even funded by the county. And so there's definitely more government backing of food in this county, and water conservation.
Mhm. Well, that's great. Is anybody? We only have a couple minutes left. Is there anybody else who wants to talk about things that are happening that are hopeful in their own communities? Innovations. I'll say that, where I live, there's been an effort to form a grain cooperative. I do notice that we are pushing against the basic drivers of the industrial system. The food in the market is convenient. It's fairly cheap because of subsidies and economies of scale, and because the system is designed around the large-scale producers. So there's a lot of barriers locally to small-scale operators creating something that's going to flourish. But there is a group of grain growers who are trying to form a cooperative where they could share a mill. I saw on Orcas Island that what they've done is a wealthy patron had bought a grain mill that was used by the farmers on Orcas Island, and also that there had been an enterprising person who'd gotten funding so that the actual school, the middle school I think it is on Orcas, they have a fairly large farm that grows food for the school, and they have a whole classroom that's a classroom where kids learn about seeds and growing seeds and transplanting and harvesting and storing and preserving. That's part of the curriculum. It's science and social studies and history. So they have managed to get food as a focal point for the curriculum of the school and also have the school garden. So I'm guessing from what I'm hearing from Caroline, from my own experience, what I've heard from others, is that where we are in this local food movement is we are at the phase of local innovations and sharing stories with one another of these little mini breakthroughs like that grain mill so that we can inspire one another to do more work in our local communities. I am so grateful myself to have stumbled into a focus on food as a pathway both to outer sustainability and to the inner experience of hope and belonging in home and community and security and having a place on earth. And I really wish this for everybody, and I hope that through my work I can inspire many people to sort of lift their eyes out of the skies and the airplanes and the travel and the being everywhere people and becoming people who live somewhere and with real people and be able to live well in the means of our earth again. So thank you very much for your attention, and go and have a wonderful evening or morning or wherever you are in the world, and thanks for coming. So I'm going to open up the microphones, and so you can, as you leave, just say goodbye or thank you or see you later or whatever you want to say, and we'll end this call. So goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Vicki.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all, and may we let us eat well.
Let us.
That's the name of our farmers market. Let us eat well. Let us, L-E-T-U-C-E.
I know how to speak.
Oh, sweet.
Thank you all very much.
Goodbye from Brazil.